Hi everyone, and welcome to TLDR Week 1 for Information Security. The way these videos are going to work is on the principle of TLDR, too long didn't read. And for each of these videos, there will be one per week for the entire semester. I'm going to go over very briefly the concept for the week, any assignments or activities that I'd like you to complete during the week, and anything else that I think might be relevant to mention. I start out with the learning outcomes, and I try to always end with the assignment for the week. All of these videos will be linked in Blackboard. I also have a playlist if that is more convenient for you. This week, the learning outcomes are being able to understand and explain basic CIA principles, explain and implement some safe handling of information, assess the value of data sets and the risks, and explain authentication, including two-factor authentication. Now, I always like to start with why. Why are you here and why do you care? I think that it's really important that everybody has a good idea of why this should be important to them, not just this is a class that I have to pass for my degree. Information security is something that has just gotten more and more important as the years have gone on. Information security is really something that is fundamental to anybody that wants to be a part of the current society, from everything from renting an apartment to getting a job. This might seem like an overstatement, but if you think about it, to rent an apartment, you have to go through a credit check. Well, a credit check is actually based off of things like payment, on time payment. Information security and lack thereof, best practices and lack thereof, is part of what ended up leading to the Equifax hack that ended up meaning that a lot of Americans and other people in Canada and other places had a lot of their very personal information stolen, including social security numbers. A social security number is how you are able to get a loan. That's what all of your identity is locked into in the United States. So it really is everything from apartments, cars, jobs, and personal protections. So the reason that we're here, now this information security class is actually required for all technical majors because unfortunately, as my hilarious meme asks you, how secure all the things? The answer is, oh, no. And unfortunately, that's part of why we're here, because if security isn't built in from the ground up, it's never going to be as good. If you don't understand why security is important while you are creating new things in the world, those new things aren't going to be as secure as possible. Now, there is a difference between corporate and personal security. Corporate security, we have more weaknesses and a larger target. There is fundamentally more money involved, and we have to worry about more people. For personal security, we talk more about things how to not get hacked or don't be pwned. And that's more a matter of personal passwords, social media, and protecting yourself. Now, I have an activity that I'd like you to go do. So I'd like you to all go to haveibeenpwned.com, try out a couple of email addresses, and see if any of your email addresses have been a part of one of the many breaches. Please feel free to pause me here while you go do that. Now, it is very likely that what you found doing this activity was that at least one, if not all, of your email addresses have actually been compromised. If you go to this Information is Beautiful link, you'll actually see the world's biggest data breaches. Now, this infographic is from 4 years ago. This hasn't gone down, this has actually just gone up, and there's been even more serious breaches since then. So Don't be sad that you are a part of a breach. Everybody is likely to be a part of some breach somewhere. That's why it's so important to pay attention to things like passwords and social media and email and credit checks, because it's really not feasible anymore to say, I just won't get hacked. It's what will I do when I get hacked, or what will I do when my information is lost. Some of the most common reasons is, first off, your password probably sucks. It is very likely that unless you have paid attention to information security in the past, you make some of the cardinal mistakes of passwords, including using the same password everywhere. So you'll use the same password for random newsletter that you will use for your banking information, and that's just never a good idea. You want different passwords for everything. Your password is really simple and it's one of the common passwords. If you go to Have I Been Pwned, you can actually check your passwords and see how good they are. It's also probable that your password or you use knowledge based authentication and you tell the truth, which don't do that. But you don't want your password to be something that is easily findable. So, like, if you make your password your dog's name and every social media ever has a picture of your dog and you yell their name everywhere, that's probably not a really good password. You also want to turn on what's called two-factor authentication, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. But most of the bigger services have two-factor authentication, and you want to make sure that you turn that on. If you would like to learn more about password do's and don'ts and password tips, you can go to this Wired article or this Krebs on Security article. As of summer 2020, the current best recommendations are to use an encrypted database, something like LastPass, KeePass type of thing. Keep all of your passwords in there so that if you need to change them, it's easy. Keep the password to the database safe, keep your database safe, and make sure that you're not reusing passwords. Authentication is how somebody can prove you are you. The three factors of authentication is something you know, something you have, and something you are. Two-factor authentication is when you use two separate factors. That does not mean that you have I know a password and I know a PIN number. It means I know a password and I have a text message sent to my phone. That's something that I know, the password, something that I have, my cell phone, and that makes it two-factor authentication. The CIA principles are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is actually specifically relating to data. So, the confidentiality of data. Keep your data secret, don't share your data with others. The integrity of the data is making sure that your data hasn't been changed in any way. So if you have, let's say, a message that you want to send to somebody, confidentiality means that you don't share your message with others. Integrity means that your message gets to your recipient in the same condition that it was sent. Availability means that if your recipient or you would like to check on your message, you can always make sure that you have that message available or you can access that data. A bonus is repudiation, and this means if you are sending a message, you want to make sure that it is provable that the message came from you. So you don't want to get into a situation where you get a message from somebody and they're like, yeah, oh man, wasn't me. Um, we want this to be provable message was sent from whoever. A denial of service is actually a very common attack, and this is an attack on availability of the CIA triad. So, denial of service or distributed denial of service, the difference is how the information is being stopped. So, a denial of service means a single source is stopping access. A distributed denial of service is multiple sources are stopping access. One of the more current examples is Mirai and its variants. This ended up actually taking off. Mirai is a virus that was actually sent to the Internet of Things devices, a lot of webcams. And all of these webcams had a hard-coded in password in the chip. So what this virus was able to do was actually take advantage of that hard-coded in password, take over the webcam, and then use that webcam to then attack other things. Now, this particular Mirai virus means that now we have all of these unsecured webcams attacking and taking down some really big sites. If anybody remembers, a couple of years ago, there was the Dyn takedown. You might have never heard of Dyn, but they're the company that does the in between translation. So, like Twitter.com, how does that actually translate to finding the Twitter servers? So, that DNS service, that's actually Dyn. You're more than welcome to look up Dyn or Mirai if you would like more information, and I have links in the module for them. Um, and the idea was that they are preventing the people that were using this Mirai virus, they were preventing other people from being able to access websites that they should have been able to access. Now, with the CIA principles, we can actually have different attacks on communication. So we can have an interruption attack where we're stopping the information from getting sent, an interception attack where we are sending the information to a third party that we perhaps don't want to have it, a modification attack where the information is sent to the third party changes it and then sends it on, and then lastly, a fabrication attack, where the third party creates a message to send that isn't actually coming from the first party. So see if you can match up interruption, interception, modification, and fabrication. Which attack goes with which principle? Policies and mechanisms. A security policy is the statements about what a company says is or is not allowed to happen on their network. A mechanism is actually how we enforce the policy. So I always use the example of passwords. So if we have a security policy that tells us what our password policy should be, as in how many characters, how often should it be changed, should it be based off of dictionary words or not, those are all, gee, wouldn't it be great if you could have a 15-character password? A mechanism is actually enforcing the policy by saying, if you don't have a 15-character password, I'm not going to let you reset your password. So these are actually two things that end up working with each other and go together. We can also have mechanisms for preventing things from happening, being able to detect or tell something has happened. Recovery, after something has happened, what do we want to do? And then we have the idea of an IDS or IPS, intrusion detection system or intrusion protection system. The example that I always use with IDS versus IPS is a security guard. If you have a just general security guard, that's an IDS system. That's going to be somebody doing the equivalent of yelling, helps, helps, you're being hacked. An IPS is helps, you're being hacked, and then doing something about it. So that would be the security guard, actually stopping the person shoplifting instead of just saying, hey, everybody, shoplifter over here. Another example that we could look at for prevention, detection, and recovery is a more real life example. So let's say we're worried about a house being burgled. If we're worried about people stealing things from a house, then we might want to have locks on all of our doors. The way that we're able to tell if things have been stolen is that our items are gone. Our recovery is how we deal with after the fact, after the items have been stolen. Do we call the police? Do we make an insurance claim? Are we replacing items? That's our plan in place for how we want to get over and fix what's happened. Now, with all of this, we have to think about how data is actually being handled. So with companies, they have a very, very large set of data, generally multiple kinds of data that they have to deal with. So we have to think about everything from databases to web pages to server and network configurations. We have to think about, for all of these backups, what are we backing them up on? Quite literally, are we backing them up on tape, hard drives, solid state, third party? We want to have a responsibility for somebody who is going to say that they are responsible for the backups. It's always better if you have somebody who, as part of their job, is taking care of things like backups and data handling. This is probably several people that have it as part of their job. And we want to have that data broken up into pieces and have somebody who's responsible for making sure that those pieces are all in good condition. Because otherwise, it's really easy to be like, oh, yeah, no, that's supposed to happen. Huh. And then nothing really happens. With all of our data, we have to think about how long we're keeping our data. So, if we are, for example, collecting data on customers, so everybody that goes to the website, we want to collect their MAC address and IP address. Whose responsibility is it to keep track of all of these? How are they being kept track of? Do we just have a database? What's the media that we're keeping these MAC addresses and IP addresses on? How long are we keeping them? Are we keeping these MAC addresses and IP addresses for a month, a year, forever? How are we backing these up? And all of our backups have to have the same questions answered. Who's keeping track of the backup? Who is in charge of making sure the backup is good? We also have to think about electronic and in real life or IRL data. So, are we talking about somebody who's like physically coming in somewhere and keeping track of those sign ins, or are we just talking about somebody visiting a website? And then we have to think about the integrity of the data. Has it been changed in any way? Now, if you are in Massachusetts, there's actually specific laws for privacy in Massachusetts. A couple of states in the United States do have some privacy laws, but it's not really widespread. The current, as of summer 2020, most thorough privacy laws are the GDPR laws over in the EU. General data privacy regulation laws, and those are actually the most current and most thorough set. So if you actually look into PII in Massachusetts, personally identifiable information, we have to first say what is personally identifiable information or PII. And then, how do we actually want to protect this? If you would like more information about this, I actually have a link to the mass.gov where you can go look up some more details. Now, all of these different pieces of data are part of data sets. All data sets have value, but they're going to have different amounts of value. For example, a credit card or a social security number might have more value than an email address. So if we're talking about the black market of selling data sets, you're probably going to pay maybe $5 or $10 per credit card number, but you might only pay 10 cents per email address. If you have combinations of these, it might go for more money. If you have, for example, social media accounts or bank accounts, that amount of money is actually going to vary based on the amount of followers or the amount of money in the account. An example that I have here is the Brazilian Underground. So, on the Brazilian Underground, as of a couple of years ago, sets of phone numbers were going for a couple hundred to $1,000. Online credentials were going for about 20 bucks a pop. Credit card credentials, 35 to 135, depending on how much the credit limit was for, things like that. Now, other examples might end up being in other places. We might see something like credit card credentials only going for $7. The chip data or stripe data maybe pops it up to 15. Any of the premium cards actually pops it up to 30. And you can see that they actually have bank account credentials will have different amounts that they're worth based on the amount that's in there. You might also see some value to airline points, hotel chain points, and some of those as well. Now, a lot of the risks for data sets, we might end up having to worry about hackers. That's completely possible. The Equifax hack, which I have a link in the module if you want to read more, or you can just Google Equifax. It was everywhere. It was a dumpster fire. Um, that is currently being blamed on hackers. Now, it's also possible that there was a PEBKEC error. Problem exists between keyboard and chair, and it was a user error. Might not even have been malicious, might have been accidental. Another big problem that we have for data set risks is quite literally apathy from consumers. Consumers are unwilling to pay more money for better protected data. That's not something that a lot of consumers will look at as they are shopping. If you would like to think about this a little bit more, I invite you to think about cars. If you have gone shopping for a car in the last 10 years, you know that there's a lot of smart information in the car. There's a lot of chips and computers and data that is being kept track of. Try to find information about who that data is going to, what's happening with that data, who that data belongs to, who can access that data, and what you're allowed to say or disagree with in terms of that data. I think that you'll actually find that research very enlightening if you haven't given a lot of thought to data set risks in terms of consumer apathy. Apathy means don't care. So consumers that don't necessarily care about their data or see it as valuable. Some other risks that we have is actually a government infrastructure risk. Now, you'll notice that not everybody on my list is actually government. Technically, Equifax is a private company, and that is a much longer explanation of why that was such a dumpster fire. It is also possible that you have an insider threat risk. Edward Snowden is a great example of this. This is somebody who is taking information and, in his case, not selling it, but other people have taken information and sold it. Now, the first lab that you're going to do is just a setup lab. You're going to set up 2 virtual machines, one Kali, one Mint, so that we can work with them later. I will have an FAQ video on my YouTube if you would like some help and to follow along getting those set up. If you would like to just work on going to get them set up, that's completely fine. The things that I'm looking for are making sure that you have properly installed both, which means it's going to have the logins for you, not just, Mint at Mint. And I'm also going to be looking that you have switched the hard disk to auto detect instead of just ISO and then booted it up again. That's the equivalent of pulling the CD out after the install for those of us that are a little older who remember CDs and installs. Um, but that's just making sure that your operating system is actually installed in your virtual machine. It's not just doing a live boot every time. If you have any questions, please let me know.